welcome back to the lecture series on we are discussing short story in the modern and postmodern era. So today we are going to start with the theorization of the genre of short story. Before I start with this new discussion, I recall I was talking about Madame Bovary a few lectures back. Um I just wanted to add, as an afterthought, how Madame Bovary's Laughter in Death can be compared with Helen Sixos's essay Laugh of the Medusa. So, Margaret Atwood famously says that men are afraid that women will laugh at them, and women are afraid that men will kill them. So, in this powerful essay by Helen Sixos, Medusa is shown as the beautiful woman that she is, and she's laughing, she's almost scoffing in jouissance, in disregard to the Freudian ideas of castration and the Lacanian perception of the woman in terms of a lack. So Hélène Sixous introduces a French term, l'écriture féminine or women's writing, as a counterculture movement to debunk the systematic oppression and silencing that women have time immemorially faced within the phallocentric, the male-centric tradition. We know that Jacques Lacan posited the symbolic structure of language is operating through the principle of binary opposition. So the French feminists aim at overthrowing this kind of a fixed symbolic structure through exploring alternative relations that might be possible between the woman's desire and the woman's language. We are reminded how Helen Sixous famously says, writing is for you, you are for you, your body is yours, take it. So écriture féminine is possible through reconciling a woman with her body. It deploys a language that is full of pun, wordplay, ambiguity, fragmentation, slipperiness, and unusual images, all of which are attempts at making a rupture to the sense of a normative language, normative use of language within a masculinist discourse. So, Medusa's laughter stands for the aspects of a woman, the aspects of the feminine that defies representation, the unrepresentability of the feminine. Now, coming to Madame Bovary's Laughter in Death, this can be juxtaposed with, the laughter of Medusa can be juxtaposed with Emma's laughter in death. In her laughter, in her death, when she attempts suicide and she's about to die, Emma scoffs at the inadequate society that cannot supply a language for positing, for holding her desire. So the repetitive failed language that we have already discussed about when we were talking about Madame Bovary, and the failure of forms at all levels in this novel stand for the failure of the woman in her attempt at etching herself through her own standards, through her own discourse, kind of etching out her own discourse and her own space within the society, and a failure with that, an impossibility of that. The society, the demands of the society and the demand of the woman cannot meet at any place. There is no reconciliation. So, as much as Emma and her seeking for aristocratic life remain unrepresentable in life as long as she lives, she becomes a timeless rebellion who is unsettling the standard meanings, the traditional meanings of domesticity in her death. So, through the staggering movement of Flaubert's Madame Bovary, which revolves around this Parnassus depiction of Emma Bovary, Flaubert, who is also seen as her alter ego, points to the impossibility of this becoming of an écriture féminine, both in the society in which Emma lives, as well as Flaubert's immediate society, right? So now coming back to short stories as genre, we need to understand some of the characteristics that have been associated with the typical short story form. The short story is traditionally seen as a compressed, cohesive, and plotted form. So, the concept of a totality of being there all together and at once, as well as that of brevity, intensity, suggestiveness, unity of effect, uh, a, a closure towards the end, and a unity in design are explored through this genre's theoretical discussions. So, the focus of the short stories' formal structure is mostly a product of 20th century critical thought. So, critics in the 20th century start trying to, they try to uh, note down certain, enumerate the features that make up the short story. The aesthetics of the genre's form attracted the interest of different critics and narrative theorists in the uh, 1960s. So, the period of the international dissemination of Russian formalist writings of the 1920s. When we talk of formalists, we have in our mind Boris Eichenbaum, we have Viktor Shklovsky, and then the emergence of structuralism with Vladimir Prop, and structuralist anthropology with Claude Lévi-Strauss, as well as the philosophy of culture with Ernst Cassirer. So the development of the short stories is constituted concurrently with the rise of the popularity of narratology, with the inception of reader response criticism, discourse analysis, and cognitive science. So the short story form has its roots in mythology and biblical verse narratives, in medieval sermons and romance, fables, folk tales, ballads, and the emergence of the German Gothic in the 18th century. Uh, its legendary roots are mediated via romantic influence, and they had to, its legendary roots that are mediated via romantic influence had to adjust to the mimesis and verisemblance, or verisimilitude, the verisimilitude standards of the 18th and 19th century realism. The realist movement and the romantic movement have had a great influence on the form of short story. So Charles May observes that the short story has, from its beginning, been a hybrid form, combining both the metaphoric mode of the old romance and the metonymic mode of the new realism. As a form, short story can be compared with, the short story, when compared with other genres like poetry, drama, epic, or novel, uh, is relatively uh, seen as neglected. Its theoretical premises have been formulated much later as compared to other genres like poetry, drama, epic, and novel. So, as Charles May argues, a genre only truly comes into being when the conventions that constitute it are articulated within the larger conceptual context of literature as a whole. Unquote. So, theories about the short story as a genre tend to be interdisciplinary and gender bending, right? Discussions of the short story relate the form to myths, to folklore, romance, genre theory, cognitive science, narratology, discourse analysis, as well as visual arts. So, short story draws both on the lyric and the novel from the very beginning, and yet within its confines, it displays a, a protean diversity. It can contain within itself a wide range of possibilities. So, the short story has genres of its own invention. Within short story, an array of possibilities can be experimented and explored. So the short story is closely related to the novel and the lyric form, as well as the essay, the letter, the cinema, the photograph, as well as the visual arts, painting, sculpture. So we see, for example, experimentation through interweaving short story and photograph in the case of Julio Cortázar's short stories, and in the case of Claire Hansen theorizes short story by looking at how it incorporates qualities of visual arts, painting, and sculpture. So, due to its long-standing theoretical neglect, the short story appears to be a form at the margins. Contrary to Edgar Allan Poe's original vision, the short tale later on, came to be associated with the avenging powers of the oppressed and undervalued, since it was perceived as eccentric and coming from the bottom of the hierarchy of arts. So Frank O'Connor, an Irish author, was the first to describe the short story as having subversive qualities. He described short story as a voice of the lonely, representing the voice of the lonely, or that of the outlawed figures wandering about the fringes of society. According to O'Connor, the short story is a genre that never had a hero, and its protagonists have been collective groups of submerged populations. Further, we see Mary Louise Pratt connecting the short story with political, gender, and regional questions. Short story carrying oppressions carrying the question of oppression that happen at different levels. So Mary Louise Pratt connects the short story as carrying the burden of oppressions from different levels, oppressions at the level of the political, the gender, and the regional. And this is very much in line with what O'Connor already says. So, Mary Louise Pratt, for example, says that the form of short story flourishes in regions where new groups, new social groups are seeking to affirm their voice within emerging national literatures or in the process of decolonization. Claire Hansen endowed the form with the capacity of expressing the repressed knowledge of a dominant culture. All these critics, therefore, argue that the short story thrives in all such societies where there are, no fixed cultural framework, especially in colonial contexts. And therefore, this form is linked to marginal people, women, to outsiders of a society, all of whom are plagued by a sense of exile and existential isolation or existential crisis. For these subjects, for these peripheral subjects, the volatility of culture, the volatility of class structure accounts for the genre's experimental nature. So we see that till a recent past, those who theorized about the genre of short story were not literary critics but practitioners of the form themselves. Since the 1960s, however, there has been a steady increase in interest in short stories, and since the late 20th century, critical and theoretical studies of the genre have flourished. So we see short story, eminent short story writers such as Edgar Allan Poe, Herman Melville, Anton Chekhov in the 19th century, and then Henry James, Flannery O'Connor, Julio Cortázar, Eudora Welty, among other poets from the 20th century who are trying to theorize the short story as a form, as a genre. So, Poe's critical comments towards the middle of the 19th century are, in fact, responsible for the birth of the short story as a unique genre. As the first short story theorist, Poe brings in discussion, you know, uh, you know, so Poe brings in discussions about the form, about the style, length, design, authorial goals, and reader affect vis-a-vis the short story, and develop the framework within which the short story uh, is discussed even today. Uh, Poe placed the short story second only to the lyric form in the pantheon of the artistic genre status, and gave it a very high ranking. So, Poe's main contribution to theorizing short story was to give the short narratives attention, which imbued it with the distinctive qualities of poetry. And I'll tell this how, I'll explain this further eh, as we discuss the short story and its form. So, how the short story has certain important similarities with the genre of poetry. So, we know the poem, the way the new critics have understood poem. The poem has its inner organization. The poem has its a well bounded structure and a kind of pattern where individual words do not matter, but the effect overall uh, is much more important. In the similar way, for a short story, it's compact and unified form. The compact and unified form of a short story uh, is very much symptomatic, very much typical of its form. A short story, in other words, is known by its compactness and its unity, which it shares with the lyric, and which allows the short story to achieve effects that are unattainable in a novel. So, a novel may experiment in different ways. It's a passage in time. The way we see events developing in time, concatenated in time, entail a lot more experimentation than that is ever possible in a short story. A lot more experimentation than that is ever possible in a short story, due to the scope of uh, time and temporality. Also, the the time, the space that a novel occupies is not possible for a short story. A short story has to, tie up its loose ends within a shorter span of time. Uh, and so, Poe also observes that a short story's brevity and intensity creates a strong undercurrent of suggestion. The language itself differs a lot from that of the novel. Uh, Poe was the first to consider endings as crucial elements in compositional strategies, and he defined the short story in terms of um, one's reading experience. So, Charles May's important work, Short Story Theories, is a compilation of essays that combine numerous viewpoints on the short story, and May's work opens up new directions for further study within the form, and it is primarily responsible for the development of a subject of the short story theory. So, in new short story theories may rose to prominence as a you know one of the seminal critics that theorized short story. It became a work, that is referred for the study of the genre of short story, and a collection of the frameworks that are used for readily analyzing short story. So, with May's new short story theories, we find some of the we as readers we have some ready features that define the short story. May's reality of artifice further delivers a detailed critical history to the form by tracing the origins, shape, influences, and evolution of the short story form. So, tracing the evolution of the short story form right from its beginnings to the present day. So, with this, I would like to conclude today's lecture, and I will meet you again for another round of discussions. Thank you.